So today I decided to take a turn and we won't be talking about science and any natural related stuff. We're just going to talk about philosophy. And considering the fact that this channel is called Seraph the Philosophy Guy, explains the fact that we can drift from the natural science to some mental muscle activity. And I decided to do something unique, something I've never done before, and that is commenting on my tweets and talking about some, because most of my tweets are potential ground for great conversation. So stick around. We got the world wrapped around our fingers, girl. And let me get right into it. This morning, so I just tweeted something I feel I should comment on. So this tweet read something like, when I look at the people around me, countless times I feel like I'm playing catch up. But other times, I'm dead sure I'm just not in the social sphere that's complimentary of folks like me. Dare I say it. Yeah, so what I meant to say there was, you know how when you're in a slightly different social group, or a social group that's not complimentary of the kind of person that you are, you feel like you should match up or fit in. I know it's kind of childish for people to feel like you have to fit in, but it's like a social pressure that each person gets to feel. So now when you're in a group or when you're surrounded by people that look at stuff and approach life in a certain way, you also want to do the same so that you can solidify your allegiance to that group. But in so doing, you kind of toss out your own personal identity. So when I say that countless times I feel like I'm playing catch up, it's like I'm trying to catch up when I shouldn't be trying to catch up. It's like I am measuring my identity based on the people around me when I shouldn't be. And when you do that, it's like an endless chase towards something that you really can't attain. So my piece of advice here is don't do it. There could be a social space that you properly fit into, and you don't need to force yourself to fit into one that you're carrying. This tweet says, I always laugh when new Jordan Peterson fans call him a Christian, yet he is an atheist as good as Sam Harris. The difference is Peterson is one who believes the Bible is a book full of useful stories and has done what he does with Jesus on Egyptian gods. So the implication behind this tweet was basically that personally, I don't think Jordan Peterson is a Christian in the everyday sense of the word, or in the conventional sense like most of you people might think him to be, because I've watched this guy since day one. I've been watching Peterson since I don't know when, and I've read his books. It's 2 books, Maps of Meaning and 12 Rules for Life. And then when you look at how Jordan Peterson approaches the Bible and how he tries to imbue into scripture some psychological meaning for it. I've seen him try to do that with Egyptian gods. And the mere fact that he can do it with an Egyptian god and can also do it for Jesus, that goes to show that there's no unique importance that is attaching to, say, the Christian scriptures. And in a debate that he had with Panburn philosophy, that he had with Sam Harris, Sam Harris pushed him in the corner and said, look, Jordan, I know you want to, I hear you're trying to say that Bible stories are true because they're useful. And then Peterson was like, no, not really. And then Sam Harris was like, but then what you're doing, putting this sophisticated psychological meaning into scriptures, I can do that. I can do that for the Quran, and I can do that for any other holy book. Why can't you do that for any other holy book? Then he was like, it's just that I've devoted so much time to the Bible. So from what Jordan was saying, you could see that the underlying reason is not that it's because he's personally coming from a place where he feels the Bible has some supernatural touch to it. It's just that he feels it's a book that stands out from any other book. Like the way you would approach, say for example, if you decided to make a whole YouTube channel about Shakespeare's stanzas and sonnets, as opposed to, say for example, a poet like some other poets. It doesn't mean that you think Shakespeare was supernatural or Shakespeare was an angel. It's just that that's your personal preference. So that's Jordan Peterson. I don't think Jordan Peterson comes across as a conventional Christian as most people would want him to be. He's a very informed man, and he's really, that's why he had sarcastically tweeted that he's just like Sam Harris, despite the fact that he feels there's some benefit to Bible stories, which I actually feel the same way. But whether they're true or not, that's the question for another day. The only time morality and pure chastity is noble, admirable, and praiseworthy is when you can hold it up with honesty, even when you're fully convinced that there isn't any supernatural intelligent being watching you. Now that's morality worth imitation. What inspired me to write this is something I read from Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. Let me just pull it from the shelf. Okay. So this is Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, the book that broke the camel's back. Yeah. So I read something from this book, and I also heard I've also listened to a lot of Christopher Hitchens debates. I've listened to many of them, if not all of them, to a point where I can mimic and I can restate some of the arguments that Christopher Hitchens put up. So from this book, in support of the quote I made, that morality is only noble and admirable when you do it for the mere fact that it itself is the end and not the means to some other end. So let me read you something about what Richard said about morality. So in chapter 6 of Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, he talks about the roots of morality, why we are good. And then in there he makes a case that morality transcends or goes beyond our culture, our religion, our background and everything. It's inherent, and every person has got that inbuilt moral sense. So this is what he argues, and then he argues that our morality predates our religious constructions. And then here in this section where he says, if there is no God, why be good? And this is something that is echoed in my tweet. So before I comment on my tweet, I want to read you a portion, just a short paragraph. Here it says, if there is no God, why be good? People ask that question. Then Richard says something like this. Posed like that, the question sounds positively ignoble. When a religious person puts it to me in this way, and many of them do, my immediate temptation is to issue the following challenge. Do you really mean to tell me the only reason you try to be good is to gain God's approval and reward, or to avoid his disapproval and punishment? That's not morality. That's just sucking up apple polishing, looking over your shoulder at the great surveillance camera in the sky, or the still small wiretap inside your head, monitoring your every move, even your every base thought. As Einstein said, if people are good only because they fear punishment and hope for a reward, then we are a sorry lot indeed. Michael Shermer, in The Science of Good and Evil, calls it a debate stopper. If you agree that in the absence of God you would commit robbery, rape and murder, you reveal yourself as an immoral person and would be well advised to steer a wide course around you. If, on the other hand, you admit that you would continue to be a good person even when not under divine surveillance, you have fatally undermined your claim that God is necessary for us to be good. Then he concludes this paragraph by saying, I suspect that quite a lot of religious people do think that religion is what motivates them to be good, especially if they belong to one of those faiths that systematically exploits personal guilt. So this book is a book and a half. So here Dawkins is saying our morality is deeper than religious convictions, and if the mere fact that the motivational factor for you to be morally upright is something that goes beyond morality in itself as being the end, but something that goes beyond that and makes morality as the means to some other end, then you defy what morality should be about. And I can give you this illustration. If you only do stuff that you know are deep down that are justifiably right, based on the mere fact that you're being watched, or you're scared of something, or you're trying to make somebody happy, that defies why that makes your whole effort you put into doing that thing not admirable. You can do something from a place where you know for a fact that you're doing it for the mere fact that it itself, that right thing you're doing, is right. You don't need any approval from somebody. You're not trying to please anybody. You're doing it for the mere fact that doing that thing is an end, not a means to some other end. That's when morality is noble. Not when you feel like you're being watched or you're putting it in efforts to please something else. Yeah. That's why I even said in the tweet that if you could uphold it, if you could uphold your moral stance, even when you're fully convinced there isn't any superior or supernatural intelligent being watching you, that's morality with imitation. I had a conversation with a friend the other day in school. He told me, like, dude, I think morality should be grounded in something, you know what I mean? Lest we just all stand as people airing out divergent opinions. Then I was like, yeah, you're right about that, but we could have another whole debate about what it is that we should ground that morality in. If you feel you should ground it in your God, then you have a lot of burden of proof on why it's justifiable for you to ground it in your God. You can make a good case to say it's necessary for us to ground morality in some gods, but what you need to bear in mind is that argument can't take you far if you narrow it down on a specific God. You could say it could be the God of the universe or some other God, but the minute you narrow it down to say a specific God, then you're in trouble. You have a lot of burden of proof. Maybe you might not clearly understand what I get, but if you think about it more, you will see that you have a bigger job to do. But if you're a person that has I think every human being has something like common human decency. I would love to believe that we all do. And there is this thought-provoking question that Christopher used to ask in most of his debates. He'd ask it everywhere. He would say something like, think of something that only a believer can do that a non-believer can't do. Think of a moral act that only a believer can do that a non-believer can do. And then at the same time, think of something immoral that a believer can do and that a non-believer can't do. And for that thought experiment, if you think of something that something immoral that a believer can do but a non-believer can do, it's easy to think about that. It's so easy. But if you think about something that is immoral that a non-believer can do, it's practically hard to actually figure out. And that goes to show that a sense of morality or a sense of right and wrong goes beyond religious construction or religious constructs. So it goes beyond all that. Every human being has some common human decency, and we hope that's the case. If you're not, then that's a whole different thing. But the problem is, if you believe all of us are made in God's image, then you have a case to answer for. Yeah. Last but not the least, I have a lot of tweets. We could spend the whole day here, but let me read you one last one. This tweet says, let's suppose you're 20 years old and everyone in the world is your age. They share your fears, uncertainties, and anxieties, concerns, and questions. Then one of your buddies says, I know what will happen to you when you die because of so and so. Exactly. You get the point. So there, what I was trying to say is, all of us, don't be lied to. Every person, we are all working around probability. And the older we get, we're just making it all up. There's absolutely nothing we can know with absolute certainty. If you really stop and think about it, a lot of things that we know, we only make conclusions because there's overwhelming evidence to leaning towards that side, to leaning towards a certain proposition that has been brought to the table. But we can't know for a fact whether such is right or not. I'll give you an example. Say, for example, the process of evolution by natural selection. Of course, it's not really. Okay, the ground on which we can argue and say it's true and it's a fact is that it's a theory that is supported by overwhelming evidence, and you'll be stupid to think do not believe in it. But the uncertainty and for lack of a better term, the agnosticism surrounding that is justifiable to some extent, because we really can't know anything with absolute certainty. Or the God question. No one can actually, if you look at all these brilliant minds arguing that they believe strongly that chances are that we could be alone in the universe, are not going around saying that they know with absolute certainty that there's nothing out there. They are saying they are most definitely sure that probably there's utterly nothing out there. Why? Because of the overwhelming evidence on the table to suppose that's the case. Because in reality, none of us can be truly certain. That's why I think to some degree agnostics with atheist leanings are slightly honest, as opposed to theists who come from a very cocksure place but yet can make justifications for the extraordinary claims they make. So for most of the questions surrounding life and the universe and everything and where we're going, where we're from, all those are hanging in the realm of probability. So the question is, it's about what's a more plausible case to adopt and what's a more plausible stance to take. But none of us can really be absolutely certain about anything. That's why I said, and then some dude just wakes up and I know what's going to happen to you when you die. How do you know? Like, what information do you have that I don't have? Or what have you been exposed to that I haven't been exposed to, or that I can't be exposed to if I genuinely want to research about that stuff and probe it further? It's utterly nothing. Jason Mraz said something like, we are all just making it up. And the further we go, we're making it up based on the mere fact that we have some more data on our side to make it up in that fashion. Yeah. But then again, that's self-defeating, because at the end of every thought, every view, every set of belief, and every story, there is a human being. Why the heck are we even social creatures with the rare ability to influence each other in the first place? And the thought that there's no running from that is simply deafening.